So I wanted to read a couple of pages from this book, Meditations on the Tarot, A Journey into Christian Hermeticism. The author, at the time of his death and the publishing of this book, chose to remain unnamed. It's not that difficult, though, to find out who the author is if you're interested and you know how to use Google. So I'm going to read a few pages here, beginning on page 66. I am the way, the truth, and the life. A quote from John chapter 14, verse 6. This formula is at the same time the summation of the first three arcana of the tarot, i.e., the arcanum of the true way or mystical spontaneity of the magician, the arcanum of revealed truth or gnosis of the high priestess, and the arcanum of transforming life or sacred magic of the empress. Sacred magic is therefore the tree of life, inaccessible to arbitrary foolhardiness, but manifesting itself in the whole history of mankind by the agency of those who know how to say, "Behold, I am the handmaid of the Lord. Let it be to me according to your word." Or rather, "Behold, the servant of the Lord. I will do according to your word." It manifests itself in human history by a miracle, namely, that human supra-biological life continues from century to century, from millennium to millennium, and its source does not dry up. I suppose he's talking about culture, you could say, supra-biological life. That the sacred fire above the altars of hearts and the altars of stone is not extinguished from century to century, from millennium to millennium, that goodness, truth, and beauty do not lose their attraction from century to century, that in spite of all, there is faith, hope, and charity in the world, that there are saints, sages, geniuses, benefactors, and healers, that pure thought, poetry, music, and prayer are not being engulfed by the void, that there is this universal miracle of human history, and that the miraculous exists. Yes, the miraculous does exist, for life is only a series of miracles. If we understand by miracle not the absence of cause, i.e., that it would not be caused by anyone or anything, which would be more the concept of pure chance, but rather the visible effect of an invisible cause, or the effect on a lower plane due to a cause on a higher plane. Incomprehensibility is not at all the distinctive quality of a miracle. On the contrary, a miracle is often essentially more comprehensible than a so-called natural and explained phenomenon. It is, for example, more comprehensible that Teresa Neumann, in Bavaria, lived for decades without any food other than the host, in view of the fact that matter is only condensed energy, and energy only condensed consciousness, than the well-explained fact of a single cell, which in multiplying itself by division, produces quite different cells for the brain, muscles, bones, hair, etc., which group themselves in such a way that the result is a complete human or animal organism. When someone tells me that all this is explained by heredity, that such are the genes contained within the first cell, that it results in such an organism, then I nod in agreement, but I am completely hoodwinked. The tree of life is the source of the miracles of generation, transformation, rejuvenation, healing, and liberation. Conscious participation with it, as the Emerald Table expresses it, is the great work of sacred magic. One can understand the idea of the great work when one compares it with the idea of modern exact science. For the idea of science is power, practical technical power and intellectual technical power. The intellectual aspect of the scientific ideal is to reduce the multiplicity of phenomena to a limited number of laws, and then reduce these to a single simple formula. It is a matter, in the last analysis, of mechanizing the intellect in such a manner that it calculates the world instead of understanding it. Then one would attain intellectual technical power. The practical aspect of the scientific ideal is revealed in the progress of modern science from the 18th century to the present day. Its essential stages are the discoveries and putting into man's service successively of steam, electricity, and atomic energies. But as different as these appear to be, these discoveries are based on a single principle, namely the principle of the destruction of matter, by which energy is freed in order to be captured anew by man so as to be put at his service. It is so with the little regular explosions of petrol which produce the energy to drive a car, and it is so with the destruction of atoms by means of the technique of neutron bombardment which produces atomic energy. That it is a matter of coal, petrol, or hydrogen atoms is not important. It is always a case of the production of energy as a consequence of the destruction of matter. For the practical aspect of the scientific ideal is the domination of nature, by means of putting into play the principle of destruction or death. Imagine, dear unknown friend, and the author writes all of this book to a friend, and it's a book, you're supposed to read it, so he doesn't say unknown friends, though as I read it, we all become his friends. This is supposed to be a solitary journey, and, well, that's not to say that I shouldn't share it with my friends. So I am. So we continue. Imagine, dear unknown friend or friends, efforts and discoveries in the opposite direction, in the direction of construction or life. Imagine not an explosion, but rather the blossoming out of a constructive atomic bomb. It is not too difficult to imagine, because each little acorn is such a constructive bomb, and the oak is only the visible result of the slow explosion or blossoming out of this bomb. Imagine it, and you will have the ideal of the great work, or the idea of the tree of life. The image itself of the tree comprises the negation of the technical and mechanical element. It is the living synthesis of celestial light and elements of the earth. Not only is it the synthesis of heaven and earth, it constantly synthesizes that which descends from above and that which ascends from below. Now the ideal of Hermeticism is contrary to that of science. Instead of aspiring to power over the forces of nature by means of the destruction of matter, Hermeticism aspires to conscious participation with the constructive forces of the world on the basis of an alliance and a cordial communion with them. Science wants to compel nature to obedience to the will of man, such as it is. Hermeticism, or the philosophy of sacred magic, on the contrary, wants to purify, illumine, and change the will and nature of man in order to bring them into harmony with the creative principle of nature, and to render them capable of receiving its willingly bestowed revelation. The great work as an ideal is therefore the state of the human being who is in peace, alliance, harmony, and collaboration with life. This is the fruit of the tree of life.